School. The place where your identity is shaped and molded. Where your happiest memories heal from. Well, here in Malden Middle School, they had it worse off than you. Because this innocent looking school houses Vault 75, one of the experimental vaults created by Vault-Tec. Within lies a dark experiment with a cold and calculated scientific purpose. Let's have a look. Entering into the basement provides us with our first bodies, what looks like a security guard and someone with a physical disability. They were most likely caught outside the vault when the blast hit. One of them appears to be naked. The vault entrance itself is similar to Vault 111, although this time it's inhabited by a force known as the Gunners. Looking down from the walkway affords us a view of a box of teddies. The first hint that this vault involves children. The room to the left contains the first terminal, focusing on admissions. The first entry is in regards to press releases. Because Vault-Tec cares so much about children, they subsidize enrollment for families with children in Malden Middle School, meaning any child can get in with their parents. It then goes on to say that it's all for the children, which of course is completely true. The next entry covers the enrollment policy. At least one of the children enrolled per family must be under 15, attend Malden, and they cannot have more than 2 adults per child. It makes you wonder if any parents left their other children or family behind to get one child into the vault. Children can also enroll on their own if the parent cannot also afford to enroll. The special admission protocols cover what happens as people enter the vault. Children under 17 are taken to the atrium area and orientated, while other residents must head to the holding area for a wee brief chat with security. It seems quite ominous. The last entry shows us how many children were admitted. As we can see, the numbers were not that high and some siblings were also admitted. After this, we can proceed to the elevator and enter the rest of the vault. We emerge into a worn hallway with a lot of rubbish, trash and rubble strewn about the place. It is at this point that resistance from the Gunners will increase, even more so than what was encountered upstairs. These doors require key cards to enter, which you'll unfortunately have to collect as you progress through the vault to gain access to deeper parts within the vault. However, we will look at these areas later. For now, we should progress down these hallways to the atrium. Ignore the floating can. Here, we can see what the lives for some of the children are like, and also get a look at our first body. What looks like a vault worker was clearly handcuffed to a railing at some point and left to die. So right away we know something transpired in this vault, though what is unknown. In another of the rooms we can see where the children may have slept, small rooms with bunk beds and dressers, in which they most likely spent most of their early lives inside, crammed in like sardines. Next, we can progress to the upper floors, where we can get a look at more of their living areas, this time in a more untouched state, and a classroom. The classroom is laid out how one would expect. All the chairs facing the front so the teacher can lecture. The terminal also gives us an idea of what it was they were taught about, detailing up top land, the surface. The story outlines a boy and a girl who train and learn and become strong, a theme emphasized throughout the story. They come across the overseer weeping like a bitch, telling them how fucked everything topside is, how they get murdered by animals and arseholes alike, and how they have no food. Also, the overseer at the time may have been a she if the story is anything to go on. It then goes on to say that it is the duty of the children to save these people, which is a lot to dump on a kid. So these children are being trained to help people, which is crap cause, you know, Vault-Tec. The lesson plans are all either corrupted or erased, so we have no idea what they say. That door can be used as a shortcut to the overseer's office, which we shall get to later. The other 2 rooms are a lot more furnished than the bottom one, so this may have been where the younger children were kept, or that the ages were mixed together. However, the second room interests me quite a bit, as there's a poster of what looks like an elk or a big deer, staring into your soul as you enter, judging your deeds, both good and bad. Back on the bottom floor, we should be heading through this locker area, where we pass the presumably once hidden body of an employee, fallen out of the locker I assume it was stuffed into. So we have someone handcuffed and left to starve, and someone either left to die in a locker or killed and hidden. So there be shenanigans afoot. Through the door at the end of this hallway leads to a room in which all of the keycard doors are found. but we shall deal with them later. For now, the sprawled body of this scientist interests me. I think they were shot, and I will tell you why later. This bottom floor really begins to show us the type of tests that they may have ran on these children. No idea how this chap died. Straight ahead is what looks like a surgery of sorts, with an operating table, gas tanks, and microscope. Perhaps where they performed operations. No idea what these are, but if I had to hazard a guess, I would say full body scanners of a sort. Possibly used to build up pictures of the children's bodies while they stood in the center of the room. The next room's purpose is clear. Here they tested the fitness of the children, possibly also laughing at the fat ones. Also, the poster on the wall is super fucking patronizing. Straight ahead we find a room with pistols laid out, which is why I think that scientist was shot. And also this room here, a shooting simulation. Now of course the first thing you must do here is thrash the score of a long dead child, and then consider the skeleton dead face down on the ground, also a scientist. Here is where you will get your first keycard, and where you can see evidence that the children were being closely observed while all this happened. So let's review. They made a vault that took in young children. They are telling the children that they are responsible for protecting the people in the world above. They tested and monitored the children and, as we have just seen, taught them to shoot using a very post-apocalyptic setting. I think Vault-Tec was building their own army. But that is not even the half of it. Back in the atrium area, we can see a room that is the personification of childlike joy and wonder. Swing sets, rock, concrete, presumably once powered generators for children to frolic on. A jungle gym-like thing that sort of makes me think of a cage. What other wonders will we find in here? Perhaps behind the stairs Yep. More corpses. None of them children so far, you will note. You see where I'm going with this, yeah? The kids were involved with whatever happened inside this vault. Now we shall head through some of these doors, one of which acts as a shortcut for us. So first of all, we will go up and be taken into a large chamber, where we can find another dead scientist, possibly killed by a table. We can also see that they were observing the children from above in the testing areas. Through here we can find the second keycard, as well as the science bobblehead on this desk, which adds another chance when hacking terminals. Down to the left here provides us with a very interesting terminal from one of the researchers. The first entry is on the aerobic aptitude test on the treadmills. It goes into detail on how the treadmill was to be operated. The next one is on heart rate guides, showing that they did indeed have goals for this particular experiment, and detailing what the desired results were. For some reason the younger kids have surprisingly higher demanded results, though I'm sure there's a reason. The side effects guideline tells us, surprisingly enough, that cardiac arrest and death were not desirable outcomes. Like, what's up with that? Next are the researchers' notes themselves. The first is about a girl, Nina. Now what's interesting is that this terminal explains how the experiment continued. Children were eventually promoted to staff, which is evident here, and it is based on scores, most likely intellectual ones. Also, this guy watches her. Creep. His next entry seems smug, talking about how more mature he feels, compared to everyone else. It also appears that they monitor literally everything that the children do. He also seems to be worried about Nina, as her scores are not high enough to get her on the research team, but she may still get sent topside, which, as we learn later, is a lie as well. Next is an entry about a supervisor losing some papers, and a boy called Rohit finding them. This becomes important soon. Lastly, he talks about how run down the range is, and that they need supplies. It appears that he is under the impression that people are being sent out of the vault, and that they are graduates when this happens. So most of the research team is likely made up of former students at this point, as we can assume some time has passed. They all appear to be unaware that people are not being sent topside, and that they are being lied to. This of course begs the question, where are they being sent to? Down the stairs on the opposite side we can find another terminal, this time from some of the assistants, one of which is Rohit, who picked up the papers. The testing schedule outlines when each child is to be tested, and also shows us how large the current generation of children was, as this was not the same as the first one, though more on that later. Testing seemed to take 15 minutes. The guidelines tell us nothing as they have been corrupted. Next is a series of hidden messages, meant only for the eyes of Rohit or James. The first one details them tampering with the schedule program. They seem to be debating whether the overseer has any helpers and also discussing smuggling in some ammo. We can assume this was the beginning of whatever happened in this vault. They also talk about a fuse, which we assume means a distraction of sorts. The next entry openly talks about resistance. They still seem to think that all the graduates are still inside the vault, and how they will beat them. They also say that they think that it is only geeks up there. Up there most likely meaning the area we will look at later. The last message talks about what to do with the kids, who we can assume are the ones still being tested, or perhaps younger, as they talk about nap time. They say they're going to hit the door, and then recruit Alma, one of the children that was being tested. So if all this happened after Rohit found those pages, then we can assume it told them something that made them want to resist, and to get out of the vault. But since they still think the other graduates are there or up top, it did not tell them everything. Lastly, if we head to the end here, we can find 2 more skeletons overlooking the firing range, though we can assume they are not James or Rohit. Now, time to have a look at the Overseer's area and find out the dark secret behind this vault. We find ourselves in the room which we can assume is where they said all the geeks were, and is also the room of the chief scientist. Indeed, only a few beds are present, and only 1 skeleton is found here. If this is the chief scientist, then they may have been the only ones up here at the end. The terminal here sheds light on what the true experiment of this vault was. The prime directive was to refine human genetics, and was designed by 2 scientists we do not know, and Stanislaus Braun, the overseer of Vault 112 in Fallout 3, and one of Vault-Tech's best scientists. It also seems to have been a collaboration between Vault-Tech and the military, and the overseer had a military background. The experimental abstracts talks about how the vault will test how fast the human genome can be improved using a combination of various techniques. It was meant to be carried out over several generations, which explains why they needed new research staff from the children already present. The next article goes into more detail about this. A certain percentage will have high intellectual scores, but too low physical ability to qualify for genome harvesting, which we will get to later. They are offered a chance to join the staff, and if they refuse, are disposed of like outgoing subjects, which, while it doesn't tell us how they're disposed of, it at least tells us that the graduates who did not join the team are dead. They are kept separate from the general population for 15 years, which means James and Rohit could be as old as late 20s or early 30s, as one of them talked to Alma, which they wouldn't have been allowed to do until 15 years had passed. Unlike the researcher that we've seen the entries of, some are permitted to the genomics lab, which is most likely this lab, if they can be trusted. The genetic harvesting protocol tells us what genomic harvesting is. So if you're over the age of 18 and get scores of excellent or superior in certain categories, then off to the chop shop with you. They were not made aware of what was happening. They were put under and then killed. Then specimens from them are collected and stored. The genomics report provides us with quite a few entries. The genome donor's entry seems to be recent and speaks of the harvest that year, and of the many undesirable traits that they have got rid of or improved. Aggression has increased, however, which begs the question whether it played a part in the eventual uprising that took place here. The solution? Trank the wee shit's dinners. We then learn of Washington, who is in fact the researcher we read the terminal of before, and even the chief scientist knows that he is creeping on Nina. Since he is too attached to the current generation, they decide to manipulate him and keep him in the dark to solve the problem. Disposed is quite morbid, as it appears Washington's first task was to burn what we can assume is 74% of his graduating class. Given that this most likely happened before his entries, as it seemed like he'd been working for a while, and still assumed people went up top, he probably didn't know he burned them. The last entry is corrupted, so the point of the vault was to improve the human genome, and of course Braun played a part. They improved it by taking genetic material from only the highest performing graduates, and burned the rest. Washington, the graduate who qualified for research, did not know this, though we can assume he learned something since they staged an uprising. Now for the Overseer's office. Inside their room we can find a key to the master lock safe by their desk, and an issue of Grognak the Barbarian can be found on their bed, as well as some loot. Now we can look at their terminal, and get the final pieces of information on the vault that we need. The operations protocol manual tells us all we need to know about the vault. First off, all the adults that came in with the kids were killed by security. Then, the children were taken to the atrium and introduced to the vault. The overseer also had to read them stories. The family policy was put in place so as many children would get in as possible, as many would not leave their parents. This allowed the vault to get more subjects. For the staff, security and personnel were standard. Researchers were to remain isolated from the children. If any graduates became researchers, they were told that the other graduates had left the vault. I find this odd, as all graduates were said to have left the vault, not just those who had become research. Next are the overseer directives. Any who were older than 18 are removed from population. If they show promise genetically, then they were harvested, or placed in research. Any other residents are culled. Those of good genetic quality were used to create the next generation. Once again, we see the all-clear signal that was never coming, just like in Vault 111. The annual turnover protocol was a ceremony of sorts that resulted in the removal of students over 18, and the previously mentioned steps carried out. We can assume the ceremony was the graduation. The overseer's logs are next. The first entry voices concerns about Washington, stating that something is off about him, further adding to the evidence that he was part of the uprising that took place. The second to last entry talks about problems in the nursery, though I have no clue where this is located. It is not clear, at least to me, if they were having problems populating the nursery or were suffering from overpopulation. The last entry talks about a fire in the archives, which I assume is the fuse James and Rohit were talking about. It could also explain why some of the hardware in here is wrecked and why some of the terminal entries were corrupted. I expect the lock's failing was not accidental either. Next, we can see that the vault is completely vacant. No one else is left. So that was Vault 75. A vault experiment straight from the mind of Stanislaus Braun. The goal was to use a combination of breeding, genetic modification, and an accelerated generational cycle to improve the human genome. The residents of Malden Middle School were permitted entry as the first subjects. Then, anyone over the age of 17, including their parents, were killed. The experiment then began, with the improving of the genetic pool being the goal. Children were told it was their duty to be the best they could be, and were trained in shooting so that they could help the people of the world above. If they did become great, they were either harvested for the improvement of the gene pool or admitted to research. Or they were killed, which is essentially the same as being harvested, so I don't really see the difference between the two. Eventually, however, two assistants, James and Rohit, and a full-on researcher, Washington, led an uprising, resulting in the freeing of the vault. I do not know how many generations this took, or if the chief science officer and overseer were the originals or replacements, but they were overthrown and many of them killed. It essentially seems like Vault-Tec were trying to create an army of super soldiers here, perhaps to one day give them a force to retake the world with. In regards to the human improvement and soldier part, it is similar to Vault 87. From what we can learn in this vault, we don't know where the children and researchers that got out went, or how long ago it was. Perhaps we may find what has become of them out in the Commonwealth, or even further, but from within this vault, we have no clues. What we do know is this: Vault-Tec achieved the impossible. They made school even worse. The second followed for a lore video, and I thought I would treat you all and make this one a vault as well. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give the video a like, and if you want regular updates, subscribe. Any suggestions for lore or future videos should be left in the comments below. Better yet, go onto my subreddit so we can discuss them in more detail. It's linked in the description. If you wish to, you can support me on Patreon, which is also linked in the description. Go have a gander at the rewards. Follow me on Twitter or Facebook to get regular channel updates or have a wee chat. Any business you want to discuss, email me at thenthapple.business@gmail.com and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I hope to see you in the next one. And until then, goodbye.